Chicago, 1933. The Great Depression had cast its shadow over the city, transforming once bustling streets into quiet avenues of desperation. Harvey Miller, a photographer for the Chicago Tribune, had been assigned to document the faces of resilience among the city's children, those still finding joy despite the economic collapse. The autumn air bit with unusual sharpness as Harvey set up his tripod at Lincoln Park. Children played despite the cold, their laughter a stark contrast to the somber mood that hung over most of the city. He adjusted his Leica, scanning for compelling subjects. That's when he spotted the boy. Perhaps 8 or 9 years old, wearing a woolen cap and a coat too large for his frame, likely a hand-me-down. The boy played alone near the pond, tossing pebbles into the water with unusual precision. There was something captivating about his solitude, the way he seemed untouched by the gloom surrounding him. "Hey there, young man," Harvey called out, approaching slowly so as not to startle him. "Would you mind if I took your picture for the newspaper?" The boy turned, his face illuminated by a smile that could melt the heart of even the most hardened cynic. "A picture? Of me? Sure, mister." Harvey positioned the boy by an old oak tree, instructing him to continue playing naturally. Through his viewfinder, he watched as the child picked up leaves, examined them with curious intensity, then tossed them into the air. It was perfect. Innocence amid hardship. When Harvey developed the photographs later that evening in his makeshift darkroom, he noticed something peculiar about the third exposure. The boy's face was angelic, his expression one of pure joy, but his hands... Harvey leaned closer to the print, squinting under the red safe light. The boy's hands appeared skeletal, almost decomposed, with what looked like rotting flesh hanging from bone-white fingers. Harvey blinked hard, certain it was a flaw in the development process. He re-examined the negative, but the disturbing image remained. "Impossible," he muttered, reaching for his magnifying glass. Under magnification, the contrast became even more pronounced. While the rest of the child appeared normal, his hands were undeniably grotesque, like those of a corpse exhumed after months underground. A chill ran up Harvey's spine as he recalled the boy's unusual precision when throwing pebbles, how carefully those fingers had examined the autumn leaves. Had he noticed anything strange about the child's hands during their encounter? No, he was certain the boy had appeared completely normal. Harvey's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at his door. At this hour, he glanced at his watch. Nearly midnight. Who would visit at such a late hour? The knocking came again, more insistent. "Coming," Harvey called, covering the photographs with a cloth before making his way to the door. Standing in the hallway was a police officer, his expression grave. "Harvey Miller?" the officer asked. "Yes, that's me, Detective James Blackwood, Chicago Police. I understand you were at Lincoln Park today, taking photographs of children." Harvey's throat tightened. "Yes, for a Tribune piece on... I need to see those photographs, Mr. Miller, immediately. May I ask why?" Detective Blackwood's eyes darkened. "Because a child matching the description of one you reportedly photographed was found dead at Lincoln Park 3 weeks ago. His body was discovered in the pond, badly decomposed, particularly his hands." Lodide. Detective Blackwood sat across from Harvey in the small kitchen, the photographs spread between them like cards in a macabre game. The detective's face remained impassive as he examined each print, but his fingers tensed when he reached the third image. "This is him," Blackwood said, tapping the photograph. "Timothy Coles, 8 years old. Disappeared on his way home from school on September 29th. Body found in Lincoln Park, pond, on October 5th. Harvey felt the room tilt. "That's impossible. I spoke to him today. He was alive, Detective. He smiled at me. He played with leaves. Mr. Miller, Timothy Coles was buried at Graceland Cemetery last Sunday." Blackwood's voice was level, measured, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "His hands were in an advanced state of decomposition when we found him. The medical examiner said they'd been submerged longer than the rest of the body." Harvey stared at the photograph, at those skeletal hands captured so clearly by his Leica. "I'm telling you, this boy was alive. Others must have seen him too. There were other families at the park." "We've already interviewed them," Blackwood replied. "Nobody recalls seeing a boy matching Timothy's description. They saw you taking photographs, but according to witnesses, you appeared to be photographing an empty area near the pond." A cold sweat broke across Harvey's forehead. "That's absurd. The boy was there. We spoke. He was excited about having his picture in the newspaper." Detective Blackwood leaned forward. "Mr. Miller, I've been with the Chicago PD for 15 years. I've seen grief do strange things to people. Were you acquainted with the Coles family? Did you know Timothy before today?" "No, I'd never seen him before." "Have you been under any particular stress lately? The depression has affected many people's mental well-being." Harvey felt a flare of indignation. "I'm not crazy, Detective, and I'm not grieving. I photographed a living, breathing child today." Blackwood sighed, gathering the photographs except for the third print, which he slid into an envelope. "I'll need to keep this as evidence, and I'd like you to come to the station tomorrow to make an official statement." After the detective left, Harvey couldn't bring himself to sleep. He paced his apartment, mind racing. Had he imagined the entire encounter? No. The photographs proved something had been there. But what? A ghost? Harvey had never believed in such things, yet he couldn't deny the evidence before his eyes. Making a sudden decision, he grabbed his coat and camera. The night was bitingly cold. As he made his way back to Lincoln Park, now deserted and shrouded in fog, the pond's surface was still, reflecting the dim glow of distant street lamps. Harvey approached the spot where he'd met the boy. Nothing seemed unusual, just fallen leaves and damp earth. He took several photographs, not knowing what he hoped to capture. As he turned to leave, a small voice called out behind him, "Did you like my picture, mister?" Harvey froze. Slowly, he turned back toward the pond. There stood Timothy, still wearing the same oversized coat, his woolen cap pulled low. But something had changed. His face, previously so full of childlike joy, now held a knowing sadness. "You shouldn't have come back," the boy said, his voice echoing strangely across the water. "Timothy?" Harvey whispered, raising his camera instinctively. The boy lifted his hands, and even in the dim light, Harvey could see they were now completely skeletal. No remaining flesh, just yellowed bone, extending from the sleeves of his coat. "They want to meet you now," Timothy said, his smile returning, though it no longer reached his eyes. "The others beneath the pond. They've been waiting for someone who can see." From the dark waters behind the boy, Harvey saw pale, bony hands breaking the surface, dozens of them, reaching upward into the night air. Morning found Harvey slumped at his kitchen table, bleary-eyed and exhausted. He'd fled Lincoln Park after seeing those hands rising from the pond, running all the way home without looking back. The 4 photographs he'd taken lay before him, developed just an hour ago. All were empty, just foggy landscapes of the park at night. A knock at the door startled him. Detective Blackwood stood outside, accompanied by a slender woman in her mid-40s, her face bearing the unmistakable marks of recent grief. "Mr. Miller, this is Margaret Coles, Timothy's mother," Blackwood said. "She'd like to see the photographs you took yesterday." Harvey reluctantly invited them in, watching as Mrs. Coles examined the prints with trembling hands. When she reached the 3rd photograph, the one Blackwood had returned that morning, she gasped. "That's Timmy's coat," she whispered, "and his cap. I knitted it myself last Christmas." Her fingers traced the outline of the boy's face. "But those hands, those aren't my son's hands." Blackwood placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Mrs. Coles has agreed to take us to Graceland Cemetery. I think it's important you see Timothy's grave, Mr. Miller." The drive to the cemetery was silent. Harvey's mind raced with rational explanations for what he'd witnessed, but none seemed adequate. As they walked among the gravestones, Mrs. Coles led them to a small, fresh plot with a temporary marker. Timothy James, Coles, 1925, 1933. Beloved son. "We're still waiting for the proper headstone, Mrs. Coles explained, her voice hollow. "The funeral home said the ground needs to settle first." Harvey stared at the disturbed earth, feeling dizzy. "I don't understand any of this." "There's more you should know," Detective Blackwood said grimly. "After you left last night, I did some research. In 1898, this part of Lincoln Park was a potter's field, a burial ground for the poor and unidentified. When they developed the park, they were supposed to relocate all the remains, but they missed some," Harvey finished. "Many, according to the records, and in 1915 they dug the pond right over part of the old cemetery. The construction unearthed dozens of remains, mostly children who had died in the influenza epidemic of 1890. Mrs. Coles gasped. "You're saying my Timmy drowned in water covering a children's cemetery?" Blackwood nodded solemnly. "The Historical Society has documentation. Apparently there were rumors even then that the pond was troubled. Children reported seeing hands reaching up from the water." Harvey felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. "Why would Timothy appear to me specifically?" "I never knew him." Mrs. Coles turned to him, her eyes suddenly intense. "Timmy loved photography. He saved for months to buy a Brownie camera. He was carrying it when he disappeared. The police never found it." A terrible suspicion formed in Harvey's mind. "Detective, was anything unusual found with Timothy's body, besides the state of his hands?" Blackwood hesitated. "There were markings on his wrists. The medical examiner thought they might be ligature marks, suggesting he'd been restrained before drowning." "Or pulled down," Harvey whispered. As they left the cemetery, Harvey made a decision. "I need to see the historical records about the Potter's Field and newspaper accounts from 1915, when they dug the pond." "What are you looking for?" Blackwood asked. "Patterns. If this has happened before, there might be clues about why it's happening now." At the Chicago Historical Society, Harvey and Blackwood pored over dusty archives while Mrs. Coles waited in the detective's car, too emotionally drained to join them. What they discovered chilled them both. "Look at this," Harvey said, pointing to a yellowed newspaper from October 1915. "When they were excavating for the pond, the foreman reported finding a wooden box containing photographic equipment, early daguerreotype materials, buried among the children's remains." Blackwood leaned closer. "And this notation in the margin. W.H. Green, photographer, missing 1891. Harvey turned to another document. "Here's Green's missing persons report. He was known for photographing children of the wealthy and the poor. He disappeared after allegations surfaced that several children he'd photographed had subsequently gone missing. You think Green was drowning children in the 1890s, and somehow Timothy's death is connected." Harvey's finger traced a sentence in the report. "It says Green was rumored to believe that photographs could capture not just images, but souls, and he was particularly fascinated by hands. He called them the windows to the soul's intentions." Blackwood sat back, his professional skepticism visibly warring with the evidence before him. "So what are you suggesting? That this long-dead photographer is somehow using Timothy to, what, lure you to the pond?" "Not just me," Harvey said quietly, pulling out his press credentials. "Any photographer. Look at the dates of the other drownings at the pond. 1933, 1924, 1915. Each time the victim was a child with an interest in photography, and each time a local photographer reported seeing strange apparitions shortly after. But why children's hands? Why the decomposition?" Harvey turned to the final page of Green's file. "According to this, when Green's studio was searched after his disappearance, they found chemicals used in developing photographs and human finger bones. The Chicago Tribune's archives occupied the newspaper's entire basement, a labyrinth of filing cabinets and bound volumes dating back to the 1850s. Harvey had called in a favor from his editor to gain access after hours, bringing Detective Blackwood with him. "What exactly are we looking for?" Blackwood asked, scanning the dimly lit rows of shelves. "Photographers who worked for the Tribune during the years when children drowned in the pond," Harvey replied, pulling out a heavy-bound volume from 1915. I have a theory. In this, they worked methodically through the archives, creating a timeline on a makeshift evidence board using a cork panel Harvey had borrowed from the layout department. 1890-1891. William H. Green, independent photographer, suspected in disappearance of 7 children before his own disappearance. 1915. Robert Carmichael, Tribune photographer, committed suicide 1 week after documenting the excavation of Lincoln Park Pond. Left note, the hands won't let me sleep. 1924. Eliza Donnelly, freelance photographer for Tribune, institutionalized after claiming to have photographed a dead boy at Lincoln Park. Child matching description found drowned 2 weeks later. 1933. Harvey Miller, current Tribune photographer, encounters apparition of recently drowned Timothy Coles. Do you see the pattern? Harvey asked, stepping back from their work. Blackwood frowned. They're all photographers who encountered something at the pond. But what's the connection to Green? Harvey pulled out the personnel files he'd requested. Look at their specialties. Carmichael was known for his portraits of immigrant children. Donnelly photographed orphans for a charity campaign, and I was assigned to photograph children for the Faces of Resilience series. Children, Blackwood murmured. But that doesn't explain how Green is connected to all this, assuming he's involved at all. Harvey hesitated, then reached into his bag and produced a small box. I went back to my apartment while you were interviewing Mrs. Coles again. I found this taped underneath my darkroom sink. I have no memory of putting it there. Inside the box lay an antique camera key, the type used to wind old photographic equipment. This isn't mine, Harvey said quietly, and look at the initials engraved on it. W.H.G. Blackwood's face paled. William H. Green. But how did it get into your apartment? I don't know, but there's something else. Harvey carefully unwrapped a cloth package, revealing a broken photographic plate. This was with it. It's an old glass negative, the kind used in the 1890s. The negative showed a blurry image of Lincoln Park, seemingly taken from near where the pond would eventually be dug. In the foreground stood several children, their faces indistinct except for one, a boy who bore a striking resemblance to Timothy Coles. That's impossible, Blackwood whispered. This photograph would have been taken 40 years before Timothy was born. Look at the children's hands, Harvey said. Each child in the photograph had hands that appeared skeletal, decomposed, just like Timothy's in Harvey's photograph. I think I understand now, Harvey said, his voice barely audible. Green wasn't just taking their photographs. He was using his camera to capture something from them, their souls, their essence, and somehow he's still doing it, using the pond as a conduit. That's insane, Blackwood said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Think about it. Each drowning victim was interested in photography. What if they were sensitive to whatever Green was doing? What if they could see what others couldn't, just like I can see Timothy when others can't? Even if I believed this, and I'm not saying I do, how do we stop it? Harvey looked down at the camera key. We find Green's camera. It has to be somewhere near the pond. The historical record said photographic equipment was found during the excavation, but they never specified what happened to it. After nearly 40 years, it could be anywhere. Not anywhere, Harvey said. In the water, where the hands are. Rain pummeled Chicago that night, turning streets into shallow rivers and filling the air with a persistent roar. Harvey waited under the eaves of the Lincoln Park Conservatory, watching for Blackwood's car headlights through the downpour. Their plan was dangerous, perhaps foolish, but neither man saw an alternative. Just before midnight, Blackwood arrived, carrying a duffel bag of equipment. I brought lanterns, rope, and tools, he said, though I still can't believe we're doing this. Did you speak with the groundskeeper? Harvey asked. Blackwood nodded. Old man Jenkins. Been working here since 1919. He confirmed that artifacts found during the pond excavation were stored in a maintenance shed on the north side of the park. Most were eventually transferred to the Historical Society, but some items were deemed worthless and left behind. They made their way through the deserted park, their footsteps muffled by rain and wet grass. The maintenance shed was a dilapidated structure, its wooden walls warped by decades of Chicago weather. Blackwood produced a set of keys. "Police courtesy," he explained with a grim smile. Inside, the shed smelled of mildew and old metal. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with tools and forgotten equipment. In the far corner stood a rusted cabinet with a padlock. "Jenkins mentioned this," Blackwood said, selecting another key. "Said it's been locked as long as he can remember. No one knows what's inside, and no one's bothered to find out." The padlock opened with a reluctant groan. Inside the cabinet, they found a wooden crate marked "Excavation Findings, Lincoln Pond, 1915. Harvey's hands trembled as he lifted the crate's lid. Within, nestled in moldy straw, lay an antique camera, a large-format view camera from the late 19th century. Its wooden body was dark with age, its brass fittings green with verdigris. The maker's plate on its base read, "W.H. Green Custom Instruments." "This is it," Harvey whispered. "Green's camera." Blackwood reached for it, but Harvey caught his wrist. "Don't touch it directly." "Not yet." They carefully transferred the camera to a workbench where Harvey examined it without making contact. The camera's design was unusual, modified from standard models of the era with additional mechanisms whose purpose wasn't immediately clear. "Look at this," Harvey said, pointing to a compartment in the base. "That's not standard for these cameras." Using a pencil, he gently pressed a small latch. The compartment slid open, revealing a collection of small, yellowed objects. "My God," Blackwood breathed. "Are those—" "Finger bones," Harvey confirmed. "Children's finger bones." But there was something else in the compartment. A journal bound in faded leather. Harvey carefully extracted it using a cloth from his pocket. The journal contained the meticulous notes of William H. Green, detailing his twisted experiments in what he called soul photography. Green had become convinced that a person's essence could be captured not just figuratively, but literally through photography, and that the hands, particularly children's hands, served as conduits for this essence. The final entries described his ultimate experiment, a camera modified with components crafted from human remains, designed to capture not just images, but life force itself. Green had sacrificed 7 children before disappearing, not by choice, but because his final victim had pulled him into the very potter's field where he had buried the others. "He's been trapped there ever since," Harvey said, looking up from the journal. "When they dug the pond, it gave him access to the surface world again, through the water. And the drowning victims? Timothy?" "Replacements," Harvey said grimly. "He needs new photographers to continue his work, and children with an affinity for photography are somehow sensitive to his presence. He lures them in, drowns them, and uses them to reach out to photographers like me." A sudden gust of wind slammed the shed door shut, plunging them into darkness, save for their lantern light. Outside, the rain intensified. "We need to destroy this camera," Harvey said. "It's the anchor holding Green here." "How do you destroy something like this?" Blackwood asked. Harvey thought of the old legends, the ways to dispatch vengeful spirits. Fire, purification. They gathered flammable materials from around the shed, old rags, turpentine, matches. As Harvey prepared to douse the camera, a child's voice spoke from the shadows. "That won't save them, mister." Timothy stood in the corner, water pooling at his feet, though he was nowhere near the door. His skeletal hands hung at his sides, bone gleaming dully in the lantern light. "Timothy," Harvey said softly, "we're trying to help you." "It's too late for help," the boy replied, his voice echoing strangely. "He's held us too long. We're part of him now." "Who's we?" Blackwood demanded, instinctively reaching for his holstered gun. "The 7, Timothy said, "and me makes 8. But he needs 9. A photographer makes 9. Harvey felt a chill. "Green wants me to join you?" Timothy nodded, his expression sorrowful. "At the bottom of the pond, where we all are, where the camera should be." Harvey looked down at the antique camera, then back at Timothy. "What happens if we destroy it?" "We don't know," Timothy admitted. "Maybe we go on to wherever we're supposed to go. Maybe we just end. But it has to go back to the water first. That's where its power comes from now." Blackwood's expression hardened. "You're suggesting we throw this thing into the pond after everything we've learned?" "Not throw it," Timothy corrected. "Bring it all the way to the bottom." The rain had transformed Lincoln Park Pond into a churning cauldron, its surface broken by countless droplets. Harvey and Blackwood stood at its edge, the wrapped camera heavy in Harvey's arms. Timothy had vanished from the maintenance shed, but both men sensed he was waiting, somewhere beneath the dark water. "This is madness," Blackwood said, raising his voice above the storm. "We should take the camera to the station, document everything properly." "And then what?" Harvey countered. "File it away in evidence? Hope Green's spirit respects police procedure? Those children have been trapped for decades. Timothy is freshly caught in whatever this is. We have to try." Blackwood sighed, then removed his coat and shoes. "I was on the department swimming team. I'll take it down." "No," Harvey said firmly. "It has to be me. I'm the photographer. That's what connects me to Green, to all of this. Besides, Timothy appeared to me, not you." Reluctantly, Blackwood helped Harvey prepare. They tied rope around Harvey's waist, anchoring the other end to a sturdy tree. Harvey removed his outer clothing, shivering in the rain. "If I tug twice, pull me up immediately," he instructed. "If I don't come up after 5 minutes, get help." "This is still a terrible idea," Blackwood muttered, but he checked the knots one final time. Harvey waded into the pond, the wrapped camera clutched to his chest. The water was shockingly cold, immediately numbing his legs. When he was waist deep, he took a deep breath and pushed forward, diving beneath the surface. Underwater, the storm's noise faded, replaced by an eerie silence. Harvey kicked downward, surprised by how deep the pond actually was. The municipal records had listed it as 8 feet at its deepest point, but he seemed to descend much further, the pressure building in his ears. His lungs began to burn as he propelled himself toward the bottom, barely visible in the murky darkness. Then, as his feet touched silt, he saw them, pale hands reaching up from the mud, dozens of them, waving gently like underwater plants. Among them stood Timothy, his whole form visible now, skeletal not just in his hands but throughout his body, held together by remnants of decomposed tissue and waterlogged clothing. Behind him were 7 other figures, children of varying ages in states of decay, corresponding to their time beneath the pond. And among them, a tall figure with a photographer's slouch, his 19th-century clothing hanging in rotted tatters from a skeleton that somehow conveyed malevolence in its very posture. William H. Green. Harvey's lungs screamed for air, but he forced himself to unwrap the camera. Green's skeleton lurched forward, bony fingers reaching for his creation. Harvey pulled back, shaking his head, then pointed downward to the mud. The spectral photographer hesitated, then nodded, gesturing to the pond bottom. Harvey understood. He pushed the camera down into the silt, burying it where it had drawn its power. From the forgotten dead of the potter's field, from the children Green had sacrificed. As the camera disappeared into the mud, a strange illumination spread through the water, emanating from the buried device. The skeletal children began to change, flesh returning to their bones, color to their faces. Timothy smiled at Harvey, a genuine smile of relief, before he and the others slowly dissolved into particles of light that drifted upward through the water. Only Green remained, his skeleton now bound by glowing chains that pulled him deeper into the mud, beyond the pond's natural bottom, into some greater depth that shouldn't have existed. Harvey's vision began to darken at the edges. He tugged the rope twice, urgently, as the last of his air escaped in a trail of bubbles. The rope went taut, pulling him upward, but something caught his ankle, Green's bony hand, emerging from the mud for one final attempt to claim him. Harvey kicked frantically, but the grip was like iron. His consciousness faded as he was pulled in two directions, upward by Blackwood's strength, downward by Green's supernatural hatred. The last thing he saw before blackness took him was a small, skeletal hand, Timothy's, returning to tear Green's grip from his ankle. Harvey awoke in Cook County Hospital, the harsh white light painful to his eyes. His throat felt raw, his chest bruised. Blackwood sat beside the bed, unshaven and exhausted. "Welcome back," the detective said. "You've been unconscious for 2 days." Harvey tried to speak, but could only manage a hoarse whisper. "What happened?" "I pulled you out after your signal, but you weren't breathing when I got you to shore. Performed resuscitation until the ambulance arrived." Blackwood leaned forward. "You were technically dead for almost 4 minutes, Harvey." The memories came flooding back. The pond, the skeletal children, Green's malevolent presence, and Timothy's final act of intervention. "The camera? Still in the pond, I assume? Whatever you did down there." Blackwood hesitated. "The storm stopped the moment I pulled you out. Just stopped, like someone had flipped a switch." Harvey nodded weakly. "The children? Timothy? I don't know. But the pond has been different since that night, clearer. Park workers reported seeing strange lights beneath the surface the next morning, like fireflies underwater. By afternoon, they were gone." Over the next week, as Harvey recovered, Blackwood brought updates. The police had quietly investigated the pond, finding no camera but discovering human remains embedded in the silt. Bones dating back to the 1890s, according to preliminary analysis. Mrs. Coles visited Harvey in the hospital, bringing flowers and a small package wrapped in brown paper. "They found this washed up on the pond's edge," she explained, her eyes still sad but somehow lighter. "The police said it belonged to my Timothy." The package contained a child's Brownie camera, waterlogged but surprisingly intact. Mrs. Coles had cleaned it as best she could and wanted Harvey to have it. "Timothy would have wanted a real photographer to have it," she said, "and I had the strangest dream last night. Timothy told me you helped him move on, whatever that means." After his release from the hospital, Harvey couldn't bring himself to return to photography immediately. The thought of looking through a viewfinder brought back too many memories of what he'd seen beneath the pond. Instead, he took a leave of absence from the Tribune and spent time researching William H. Green. He discovered that Green had been considered a pioneering but eccentric figure in early Chicago photography. Before his descent into madness, he had advocated for using photography to document social conditions, particularly the plight of poor children. Somewhere along the way, his desire to capture their essence had twisted into something monstrous. 3 weeks after the incident, Harvey finally returned to Lincoln Park on a crisp, clear autumn day. The pond sparkled innocently in the sunlight, showing no sign of the horrors it had harbored. Families strolled along its edges, and children played nearby without fear. As Harvey stood watching, he felt a presence beside him. Turning, he expected to see Blackwood or perhaps Mrs. Coles. Instead, he found himself looking at empty air. But from the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of something. Not Timothy or the other children, but a brief impression of light, shaped like a small hand waving goodbye. That evening, Harvey unpacked his camera equipment, which had remained untouched since the incident. Among his belongings, he found the photographs he'd taken of Timothy, all now showing only empty park landscapes, no trace of the boy or his skeletal hands. All except one negative, which Harvey had never developed. Holding it up to the light, he could just make out a group of 8 children, standing together, their hands and bodies whole and healthy. In the background stood Lincoln Park Pond, sunlight dancing on its surface. Harvey carefully placed this negative in an envelope, sealed it, and locked it in his desk drawer. Some photographs were better left undeveloped. 6 months passed. Spring came to Chicago, bringing new growth and washing away the last visible traces of winter. Harvey had returned to photography, though he now specialized in architectural studies rather than portraits. The Tribune had been understanding about his change in focus, attributing it to his near-death experience. Detective Blackwood had been promoted to lieutenant, his handling of several difficult cases, officially not including the pond incident, which remained undocumented in police records, earning him recognition within the department. He and Harvey maintained a friendship, meeting occasionally for coffee or drinks, carefully avoiding direct discussion of what they had witnessed. On a warm May afternoon, Harvey was photographing the new additions to the Chicago skyline when a messenger delivered an envelope to him. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the Toledo Blade and a brief note from Blackwood. "Thought you should see this. Similar?" The article described the discovery of an antique camera in Lake Erie by a local fisherman. Shortly afterward, several children in the area had reported seeing a man in old-fashioned clothing taking photographs near the lake. One child had drowned the following week. Harvey's hands trembled as he read the details. The camera was described as a late 19th century view camera with unusual modifications. The article included a photograph of the device, which had been donated to a local museum. Though weathered by decades underwater, it bore a striking resemblance to Green's camera. But that was impossible. Harvey had buried Green's camera in the silt of Lincoln Park Pond. He had watched as whatever supernatural power it contained had freed the trapped children and bound Green himself. Unless... what if Green had made more than one? Harvey immediately telephoned Blackwood, who shared his concerns. "I've already contacted the Toledo police," Blackwood said. "They're taking it seriously, especially after the drowning. But Harvey, if there's another camera..." "There could be more," Harvey finished. "Green's journal mentioned experiments, plural. What if he created several of these devices? The implications were chilling. How many ponds, lakes, or rivers across America might harbor similar horrors? How many forgotten potters' fields lay beneath recreational waters, providing the conditions Green had exploited? Harvey made a decision. "I'm going to Toledo. I need to see that camera." "Not alone," Blackwood said firmly. "I'll arrange for leave. We do this together." 2 days later, they arrived in Toledo, presenting themselves to the local authorities as specialists in historical photography, with information about the recovered camera. The Toledo police, dealing with their own unexplained drowning and spectral sightings, were surprisingly receptive. The camera was being kept at the Toledo Museum of Science, under study by their conservation department. The museum director, Dr. Eleanor Marsh, greeted them with obvious relief. "We've experienced some unusual occurrences since the camera arrived," she explained, leading them through quiet galleries. "Equipment malfunctions, unexplained cold spots. One of our conservators quit after claiming he saw hands reaching out of the camera's lens. The camera itself was housed in a separate workroom, sealed in a glass case. Even at a distance, Harvey could see it was nearly identical to Green's original. The same modified design, the same brass fittings, now cleaned of lake residue. "Has anyone opened the base compartment?" Harvey asked, careful to keep his tone professional. Dr. Marsh looked surprised. "How did you know about that?" "We only discovered it yesterday. There appears to be a hidden storage space, but the mechanism is jammed. We haven't forced it for fear of damaging the artifact." Harvey exchanged glances with Blackwood. "Dr. Marsh, I believe this camera may be connected to several historical crimes. It would be in everyone's best interest if it were temporarily removed from display and secured." "Crimes? What sort of crimes?" "Child disappearances dating back to the 1890s, Blackwood said quietly. "We have reason to believe the creator of this camera was involved in several deaths in Chicago during that period." Dr. Marsh's face paled. "That's disturbing. But this is a museum piece now. We can't simply—" "There was another drowning here last week," Harvey interrupted. "A child. Has there been any connection made to the camera's discovery?" "Not officially," Dr. Marsh admitted, "though some of the staff have speculated. The timing is concerning." Before they could press further, a young museum assistant burst into the room, visibly agitated. "Dr. Marsh, there's a boy in the main gallery asking about the camera. He says he needs to see it. When I told him it wasn't on display, he said he already knows where it is. Harvey felt a chill run down his spine. What does this boy look like? Maybe 10 years old, soaking wet, though it's not raining. I offered him a towel, but he just kept asking about the camera. Harvey and Blackwood moved immediately, rushing to the main gallery with Dr. Marsh following close behind. There, standing alone in the center of the room, was a boy in wet clothing. His face was pale, but otherwise normal. His hands, however, were partially skeletal, with bone visible through decaying flesh. Visitors walked past the boy without noticing him, their gazes sliding away as if he were invisible to them. "You're like the other man," the boy said when he saw Harvey. "You can see us." Harvey approached slowly. "What's your name?" "Michael Denton. I drowned last week." The boy's voice was matter-of-fact, devoid of the fear such a statement should carry. "He took my picture first, the man with the old camera, then he followed me to the lake." Blackwood had positioned himself between the boy and the exit, though it wasn't clear if a spirit could be prevented from leaving. "Who took your picture, Michael? Was it a man named Green?" The boy shook his head. "He didn't say his name, but he had the camera, the one that was in the lake for a long time. He said it chose me because I like taking pictures too." Dr. Marsh watched this exchange with growing horror, finally able to see the spectral visitor now that he had been pointed out to her. "What is happening here?" she whispered. "The camera's influence is spreading," Harvey explained grimly. "It's found a new photographer, someone continuing Green's work. And it's claimed at least one victim already." Michael's gaze fixed on Harvey. "There are others under the lake, old ones from long ago. They want to come up, but they need more like me, more hands." "How many others, Michael?" Harvey asked, dreading the answer. "6 more, and then the special one, the one who takes the pictures. 7 child victims, then a photographer. The same pattern Green had followed in Chicago. History was repeating itself." "We need to find who has the camera now," Blackwood said. "The new photographer continuing Green's work." Michael pointed to a newspaper on a nearby bench. "His picture is there. They wrote about him finding the camera." The newspaper featured an article about local fisherman Howard Mercer, who had discovered the antique camera tangled in his nets. The accompanying photograph showed a middle-aged man proudly holding his unusual find before donating it to the museum. "But the camera is here," Dr. Marsh protested, "in our conservation lab." "No," Michael said simply. "That one is empty now. Its power moved to the new one he made." Harvey remembered Green's journal, the meticulous notes on transferring essence from one vessel to another. "He's created another camera," he realized, "using the original as a template." Dr. Marsh looked bewildered. "That's impossible. The craftsmanship in that camera would take years to replicate." "Not if he had help," Harvey said darkly. "Not if Green's spirit guided his hands." Howard Mercer's home stood at the edge of a working-class neighborhood near the lake, a modest structure with peeling paint and a small dock extending into the water. Harvey and Blackwood approached cautiously, having left Dr. Marsh at the museum with instructions to secure the original camera. "Toledo PD is sending backup," Blackwood said quietly as they neared the house. "But they're treating this as a courtesy to Chicago. They're not convinced there's a real threat." "They will be," Harvey replied grimly. No one answered their knocks. The windows were dark despite the late afternoon hour. After several attempts, Blackwood tried the door handle and found it unlocked. The interior of Mercer's home told a disturbing story. The living room had been converted into a makeshift photography studio with primitive developing equipment arranged on folding tables. The walls were covered with photographs, all children, all captured with unusual focus on their hands. "He's recreating Green's process," Harvey whispered, examining the images. "Look at the progression." The earliest photographs showed normal children with normal hands. As they moved through the collection, the images began to show subtle distortions, slight blurring around the fingers, unusual pallor. The most recent photographs showed several children with hands beginning to appear skeletal, though not as pronounced as Timothy's had been. 6 children, Blackwood counted. Plus, Michael Denton makes 7. One more victim than the photographer himself, Harvey concluded. That's Green's pattern. A door at the back of the house led to a cellar. The stench that greeted them was unmistakable. Photographic chemicals mixed with the sickly sweet smell of decay. Harvey had smelled it before, in his own darkroom when Timothy had first appeared. The cellar was a more elaborate version of the upstairs studio. In the center stood a workbench where a camera was taking shape. Not yet complete, but clearly modeled after Green's design. Parts of it gleamed new, while others appeared ancient, as if salvaged from the original. Most disturbing were the contents of a small wooden box beside the workbench. Tiny bone fragments, carefully cleaned and sorted. From the children, Harvey said quietly. For the new camera. A splashing sound from outside drew their attention. Through the cellar's small window, they could see a rowboat moving away from Mercer's dock, a lone figure hunched over the oars. "Mercer," Blackwood said, "and he's heading toward that small island." They rushed outside in time to see the boat reaching a tiny wooded island about half a mile offshore. As Mercer pulled his boat onto the island's small beach, they could see he was carrying something bulky, the partially completed camera. "There's another boat," Harvey pointed to a second rowboat tied to Mercer's dock. "We should wait for backup," Blackwood cautioned, but his eyes remained fixed on the retreating figure. "There's no time. Look." A small shape was moving through the water toward the island, not swimming, but walking, as if the lake bottom rose nearly to the surface. It was Michael Denton, his spectral form proceeding steadily despite the water that should have been over his head. Behind him, more shapes appeared beneath the water's surface, skeletal hands reaching upward, following Michael toward the island. "Green is gathering his victims," Harvey said. "I think this is the culmination of whatever ritual he began in Chicago 40 years ago." They took the second boat, Harvey rowing with desperate intensity while Blackwood kept his service weapon ready. As they approached the island, they could hear a strange, rhythmic chanting, not in Mercer's voice, but in a deeper, more resonant tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The island was little more than a rocky outcrop, covered with stunted trees and underbrush. A narrow path led from the small beach to higher ground. They followed it cautiously, the chanting growing louder. In a small clearing at the island's center, Howard Mercer knelt before a crude stone altar, the unfinished camera placed upon it. Around him stood 7 spectral children, Michael Denton and 6 others, all with hands in various states of decomposition. Their eyes were vacant, their expressions slack. And behind Mercer, barely visible as a distortion in the air, loomed a taller figure, the unmistakable shape of William H. Green, his hands guiding Mercer's as they worked to complete the camera. "He's possessed," Blackwood whispered. "Green is working through him." Mercer's head snapped up, his eyes widening at the intrusion, but when he spoke, the voice was not his own. "The photographer from Chicago," Green's voice emerged from Mercer's mouth. "How persistent you are, but you're too late to stop what began 40 years ago." "It's over, Green," Harvey called out. "We destroyed your camera in Chicago. We'll destroy this one too." A chilling laugh emanated from Mercer's throat. "Destroyed? No, merely transformed. Each sacrifice, each camera brings me closer to permanence. This vessel is temporary." He gestured to Mercer's body. "Soon I will need neither hosts nor cameras to manifest." The spectral children began to move, forming a circle around the altar. Their skeletal hands linked together, creating a boundary that glowed with an unearthly light. "7 children to open the way," Green intoned. "Their innocence and potential feeding the threshold, and a photographer, one who sees what others cannot, to cross over and bring me through." The 9th sacrifice, Harvey realized. Mercer himself. Green smiled with Mercer's face. "Not Mercer. You, Mr. Miller, the one who escaped me in Chicago. The circle requires completion. The spectral children tightened their circle, the glow from their joined hands intensifying. Michael Denton looked toward Harvey, a silent plea in his eyes. Blackwood raised his gun, though both men knew bullets would likely pass harmlessly through Green's spiritual form. "You can't stop this," Green said through Mercer's mouth. "The cameras were merely tools, vessels to collect and focus the essence I required. Now, after decades of preparation, the threshold is ready." Harvey's mind raced. If the cameras were merely tools, then destroying this one wouldn't end the threat. Green had already moved beyond needing his original creation, having transferred its power to this new vessel. What they needed to destroy was Green himself, or rather, the connection that allowed his spirit to manipulate the physical world. "The children," Harvey said suddenly, looking at the spectral forms. "They're the anchors, aren't they? Not the cameras. You're using their trapped souls to maintain your foothold here." A flicker of surprise crossed Mercer's possessed face. "Perceptive. But knowing changes nothing. It changes everything," Harvey countered. He turned to the children, addressing them directly. "Michael, all of you, you don't have to help him. He can't force you if you resist." "They cannot hear you," Green sneered. "Their wills are mine now, as yours will soon be." But Michael's expression had changed, awareness returning to his eyes. The boy's spectral form flickered, his hands momentarily appearing normal before reverting to their skeletal state. Green noticed the disruption, snarling in anger. "Enough!" He thrust Mercer's hands toward the nearly completed camera, inserting the final components, small bone fragments that Harvey recognized as finger bones, just like those found in the original camera. As the last piece was fitted into place, the air above the altar began to distort, a swirling vortex forming. Through it, Harvey caught glimpses of a grey, lifeless landscape, a twisted reflection of the world, where skeletal figures wandered aimlessly among ruins. "The threshold opens," Green exulted. "Soon I will return fully, bringing others with me. The barrier between life and death, thinned by my experiments, will finally tear." Harvey knew they had seconds to act. He caught Blackwood's eye, a silent understanding passing between them. While Green was focused on his ritual, Blackwood circled behind, approaching Mercer from the rear. "You failed in Chicago," Harvey said loudly, drawing Green's attention. "Your camera ended up buried in mud, your victims freed. What makes you think you'll succeed now?" "Chicago was merely a test," Green replied. "Each failure taught me more about the boundaries between worlds. This time the conditions are perfect. Lake Erie sits atop countless unmarked graves, immigrant sailors, the forgotten dead of centuries. Their collective energy, combined with my sacrifices, creates a nexus of power unlike any other." As Green spoke through Mercer, his spiritual form became more defined, more solid. The vortex above the altar expanded, the wind from its rotation whipping around the clearing. Blackwood had nearly reached Mercer when the fisherman's body suddenly stiffened. Without turning, Green made a dismissive gesture, and Blackwood was thrown backward as if struck by an invisible force. "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" Green laughed. "Your detective friend is tenacious. I'll grant him that." Harvey needed to buy time to find a weakness in Green's plan. "The children you've taken, why them specifically? Why Michael and the others?" "Sensitivity," Green answered, seemingly pleased to explain his work to someone who could appreciate its complexity. "Certain souls resonate with the threshold. Children see what adults cannot, and some children see more than others. Those with an affinity for capturing images, young photographers, they see best of all." As Green spoke, Harvey noticed Michael's form flickering more frequently, the boy's expression increasingly lucid. The other spectral children showed similar signs of disruption, their circle wavering. "Like Timothy Cole's," Harvey said. "He fought you in the end." Green's borrowed face darkened, a momentary resistance, nothing more. "He freed me from your grip," Harvey pressed. "He chose to help rather than serve you. These children can do the same. "Silence!" Green roared, the vortex pulsing with his anger. Harvey turned to the spectral children. "You can break free. Timothy did it. Michael, all of you. He doesn't own your souls." Michael's form solidified further, his skeletal hands gradually regaining flesh. "He's right," the boy said, his voice small but clear. "I can feel it. We can choose." One by one, the other children began to resist, their forms flickering between spectral decay and wholeness. The circle of light wavered, the vortex above shrinking slightly. Green howled in rage, Mercer's body contorting unnaturally. "You cannot defy me. I collected you. I preserved you." "You trapped us," Michael countered, his voice growing stronger. "But we don't belong to you." With visible effort, Michael broke the circle, pulling his hands free from those beside him. The chain of light shattered, plunging the clearing into sudden darkness as the vortex collapsed in on itself. Green's spirit form lunged toward Harvey, abandoning Mercer's body, which crumpled to the ground. Harvey felt an icy grip around his throat, spectral fingers seeking to strangle him. "If I cannot have my threshold," Green's disembodied voice rasped, "I will at least have you, photographer." Michael appeared beside them, his form now fully restored, no trace of decay remaining. "Let him go," the boy demanded. "We're free now, all of us." The other 6 children materialized around Green, their hands now whole again, reaching for the malevolent spirit. Green's form began to dissipate, pulled in 7 directions at once. "What are you doing?" he shrieked. "Stop this!" "Taking you with us," Michael said solemnly. "Not to your world, but to ours, the real beyond." Green's spirit thrashed and wailed as the children's hands caught hold of him, their touch seeming to burn his spectral form. "No! I am meant to return, to live again." "You're meant to move on," Harvey said, "like we all are eventually." As Green's spirit disintegrated under the children's touch, a soft light filled the clearing, warm and golden, unlike the cold illumination of the threshold. The children's forms began to fade, not into nothingness, but into this gentle radiance. Michael turned to Harvey one last time. "Thank you," he said simply, "for seeing us." Then they were gone, Michael, the 6 other children, and William H. Green, leaving behind only the incomplete camera on the stone altar and Howard Mercer's unconscious form. Blackwood groaned, pushing himself up from where he'd been thrown. "What happened?" "They found their way out," Harvey replied. "All of them. They destroyed the unfinished camera, breaking it into pieces and burning what would burn, then scattering the ashes in the lake. Mercer, when he regained consciousness, had no memory of his actions since finding the original camera, as if Green's influence had wiped his mind clean. The Toledo police were skeptical of their explanation, but could not deny that something unusual had occurred. The drowning of Michael Denton remained officially unsolved, though the boy's parents reported dreams of their son telling them he was at peace. Before leaving Toledo, Harvey and Blackwood returned to the museum, where Dr. Marsh showed them the original camera. Now completely inert, its hidden compartment empty of bone fragments, whatever power it had once held was gone. "What do we do now?" Blackwood asked as they boarded the train back to Chicago. "Are there more cameras out there? More of Green's work, waiting to be discovered?" "I don't know," Harvey admitted, "but I think Green himself is truly gone." The children made sure of that. He gazed out the window as the train pulled away, watching Lake Erie recede into the distance. For a moment, he thought he saw figures standing on the shore, 8 small silhouettes against the setting sun, their hands raised in farewell. Harvey raised his own hand in response, knowing they would never return, and feeling strangely at peace with that knowledge. Some photographs were indeed better left undeveloped, some stories better left untold. But some deserved to be remembered, if only by those few who had seen the truth with their own eyes. And as the train carried him home to Chicago, Harvey Miller silently promised that he would remember both the horror and the hope, the darkness and the light, and most of all, the children who had found their way free. 2.